So this is crazy. I had a bond hearing the very next day. The judge. Funny story from the bond hearing. The judge. I don't know if it was the very next day. Maybe it was 3 days later. But I will say this: they literally took me off the streets, took me to FDC, changed me into jail clothes, put me in a solitary confinement cell, left me in there for 11 days with no shower, no phone call, no visits. They wouldn't let me talk to anybody, no communications. I went to my bond hearing in the middle of all of that, but still they kept me in that cell. They would not let me out of there. I ended up being in there almost, I think it was 17 days until they let me out.
Damn. Solitary confinement, 17 days.
They let me out of the cell to move me to another block. They didn't let me out of jail. They moved me to a regular block, and then they took that. I made one phone call. Then they took me back to the cell and said because they had like if you were coming into the jail or you were leaving the jail, they would lock you down on quarantine, which was COVID protocols saying that we don't want you to transfer COVID, so we're going to isolate you from everybody. But
So
I ended.
who was that phone call to?
I talked to my mentor, the founder of Charm Prison Ministry in Houston, and was just trying to kind of tell him like how to get my affairs in order.
Okay. So you spoke to him and then you get locked up. There's a bond hearing. Bond was denied, I assume, right? And then you're in there for 11 days. You get a phone call. You're there another 6 days or so. And at which point do you go to a pretrial hearing? Which when did that happen?
So they don't do any here. They don't do any more hearings there. I end up about staying there about 30 days. I had my bond hearing. They denied my bond. Then they put me back in solitary after 1 day out of solitary, and they about 2 weeks later they put me on a bus and take me to the airstrip and put me on Con Air. Yes, Con Air is a real thing.
Mhm.
Put me on Con Air and they fly me to West Virginia to well, I go to Oklahoma City. They leave me there in transit for a few weeks in solitary confinement again. Put me on another plane, fly me to West Virginia, and then they put me in Northern Neck Regional Jail. I was there for about 10 days. And they call a van and put us on a van, load us in the van, and take us to Washington, D.C., to the D.C. gulag or the D.C. jail, but we call it the gulag. But where I ended up staying there for 32 months.
Was there ever a trial?
Yeah, so I did go to trial. There was a it was a such a long process.
And what
You
were the
know,
charges exactly? Was it did they include the criminal damage you did to the property or
right, they had vandalism or destruction of government property. They had 3 assaults on federal officers for throwing items at the riot police. None of them struck them. None of them identified me as throwing anything, but they said I assaulted federal officers. And then the other ones were redundant, basically. They were like being armed because I had a tomahawk on Capitol grounds while committing acts of violence, trespassing. I had the 1512 charge, which was the obstruction of justice, which the Supreme Court later threw out. It was 12 charges, but they were all basically it was the assaults, destruction of property, and trespassing.
okay,
Um, and but so in this process of 32 months in the DC jail, they denied us visits for 2 years with our families. They
damn,
denied us religious services for 2 years. They
damn,
denied us haircuts for a whole year. They denied
dang.
us fingernail clippers for a whole year under the guise of COVID protocols. They had the barber shop is off the dorm, and instead of we had to logically figure this out for them. They said, "Well, you guys can't go to the barber shop because you guys won't take the COVID shot, so you might give the barbers COVID, and they'll go back to their wing and get everybody sick." Meanwhile, Muslims get a medical exemption because a religious exemption, so they
Oh,
don't
they
have to take. Yeah,
who?
we've talked to them. The Muslims in the DC jail.
The Muslims, okay.
Yeah, so we were Christians, we're like, "Well, we wanna use our religious exemption because the way they created the vaccine was they used aborted fetal tissue to test and do all that,
Got
so
it.
we're against
But the
that."
Muslims were given, "Hey, you're good. Salam alaikum,
And they
brother."
were allowed to go to mosque and pray every day and do all these things. Meanwhile, we wanna use our religious exemption. We can't go to chapel. We can't receive communion. We can't have a volunteer come and do Bible study on our wing. That's why we also didn't get visits because they said, "If you guys have COVID and you go to visit and you don't have the vaccine, then your family could give you COVID." And even so, this was how bad it was. Even a couple of guys even said, "You know what? I'll take the vaccine just so I can see my family because it means that much."
Yeah.
They took the vaccine and they said, "You know what? We're sorry. Your family's not vaccinated, so we're not gonna be able to allow you to visit." And so they did that for 2 years, and then the haircuts and the fingernail clippers were because we couldn't go to the barber shop because we would get somebody sick. But finally, we told them, we're like, "Look, we had got the US Marshals in there multiple times because we had people raising hell all over the United States on the outside."
Yeah.
And we said, "How difficult would it be for them to bring 1 set of clippers and a set or 2 of fingernail clippers in here with some sanitation, some sanitizer, and
Right.
let us cut our own hair, let us do our own fingernails." And they finally, after 2 year or a year, let us do that.
Damn. So you were in there for